Welcome to the Lifestyle Overland story. This year has been quite a wild ride, and today is no exception as we kick off a new chapter of explorations in a land I've only dreamed of setting foot in. Until now. How did this all come about? Well, one of the best parts of sharing our adventures with the world means that we've had the pleasure of meeting some amazing folks from around the world. And through our conversations about shared passion for overland travel, some of these people have become close friends over the years. So, when one of those friends invites you to something called Classic Cruise, where you get to drive some classic Land Cruisers through a private estate in the Highlands of Scotland, well, you basically drop whatever you're doing and buy a plane ticket for a very special, possibly once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. After a very long but comfortable flight, we descended through the low clouds, and for the first time, I laid my eyes on Great Britain, where my journey north to Scotland begins. After collecting my bags and working my way through customs, I met up with my good friend and one of Lifestyle Overland's biggest fans, Tim Lunn, who drove all the way into the big city to give me a ride to his home. After getting a fair taste of the United Kingdom's motorways and wrong side of the road driving, I arrived to a warm welcome by Marge, Tim's better half, who showed me to my room for the next few days while we prepped for the long drive north.
That middle drawer is empty if you want to put stuff in it.
Okay, perfect.
And I've put a couple of hangers here.
My warm welcome only got better as I came downstairs to a steaming plate of beef and a wee dram of whiskey to get this trip off to a proper start. The next morning, we all sat down with our morning coffee to pore over maps of Scotland and England as we planned our route to the Classic Cruise event.
You're talking about 4.5 hours to get to the Lake District.
Okay. The plan was to incorporate some of Tim and Marge's favorite spots along the way, including a few quintessential stops for myself, since this is my first time in the UK. Fairly satisfied with our trip plans, Tim and I headed out in a 70 Series Troopy to visit one of his favorite Toyota shops and introduced me to the Craddock & Sons crew who have been helping prep his 40 Series Land Cruiser for this event. As we wound our way down the tight lanes, I couldn't help but feel somewhat like I was back in my Tennessee hometown with these rolling green hills and small farms dotting the landscape. The only thing different was the stone fences and century-old houses, but it strangely felt like home in its own unique way. This little excursion was also a good opportunity to familiarize myself with Tim's Troopy, which I would have the pleasure of driving to Scotland in the coming days. Well, provided I could wrap my head around driving on the opposite side of the road, which was currently boggling my mind as I watched Tim navigate the infamous and plentiful roundabouts. Remember just a second ago when I said I felt like I was in Tennessee? Well, the universe decided to really mess with my head when we entered the motorway and came upon none other than a classic Tennessee Highway Patrol car.
Are you serious right now? There's no way. A Tennessee State Trooper in England?
Tell me that's not a glitch in the Matrix. After a quick stop to pick up some treats for the fellows at the shop, Tim took a few back roads to show me what green laning in the UK is like, which is about as close as you can get to off-road travel in these regions. Then we rounded a corner and arrived at the Craddock & Sons workshop, farm, and campground compound, where my eyes quickly began feasting on a lineup of Toyotas that, if I'm being honest, had my heart skipping a few beats.
I put different mirrors on the 40s. I've just ordered some for that beige one and mine when my doors are done.
After meeting the crew, Benji Craddock gave us a tour to see some of the current projects in their care, ranging from classic 40 series cruisers all the way up to modern 200 series models.
Recently, we're finishing off the front and rear bumpers, and it's got some side steps.
It's gorgeous.
It is gorgeous.
That's just,
These are popular in America, eh?
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
If you want to see the interior, it's
Okay.
absolutely exquisite. I don't really want to touch it, but
Oh wow.
yeah, it's been a nut and bolt restoration.
I love that steering wheel. That's real leather too, huh?
Oh yeah. We've done some custom work. It's an original bumper, but we've made a little hoop and then fitted a laser light in it. We've got new end caps coming and black stainless bolts to bolt it on with.
Very cool.
Those wheels come from the States actually. Do you know SCS wheels?
Oh yeah, I run them on my rig.
Yeah,
yeah. On the 4Runner. Yeah. Being a hands-on guy myself, I could appreciate the quality of work, and I was also very impressed with the fact that many of the parts that they used were fabricated in-house. Speaking of which, Benji made sure that I had some of his NBF bespoke breathers to go back to the States with me for our own fleet.
Factory turbo version of Tim's engine. So it's a 1HZT
Yeah.
with a high mount turbo and a large turbo.
Oh my gosh.
So the manifold's been made out of a set of extractors that were for a 1HZ.
I love it.
So we've had to mount an electric switch in the cab,
Okay.
which we've done, but I had little stickers made to try and make them look like the original decals with the white
Wow.
etching. I'm a big believer in the little details.
Very nice. And you said it's out of a Prado?
It's a Hilux Surf actually, the engine, but then the gearbox is a 70 series 5-speed box
Yeah.
out of an LJ70. The brakes are from the 60 series. There's the radiator's a 70 series. Yeah, there's a mix mash of bits to make it all work.
It looks slick, man. Like it was made for it. I find this worldwide love affair with these trusty rigs fascinating, and I think I could have spent all day here drilling over these builds and soaking up the British Land Cruiser culture. Beautiful Toyotas aren't the only machines these folks build. Since this is also a working farm, their passions for tractors is pretty apparent as well, though this one isn't so much for farm work anymore. After spending some time drooling over all the fun projects, we were joined by Jim Stokes, another subscriber and fellow Overland Bound member, who let me take a ride in his Defender while we hunted up some brunch. All right, here we go. This isn't my first time in one, but this is the nicest one I've ever been in.
Wow.
The other one was in Costa Rica, and it had a gear shift, headlights, and that's about it.
Well, our daily driver is a 90 short wheelbase. It's
Yeah.
a 2015, one of the last ones to come off the production line.
Yeah.
That's our daily driver. My wife's got that. She's
Oh, nice. I love these too. I found a vintage one that's going to go in the Beast.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah. My granddad had one of those in his Ford pickup truck when I was a kid, and I was like, I gotta have one of those.
Yeah, my dad always had a Compass, so I got one in the 90, I got one in the 80.
Nice. So what we're gonna eat?
Just there's a garden centre just down here, so we can go there.
Nice.
Whatever that is,
Oh,
76,
yeah.
78, I don't know.
Nice. Just a ways down the road, we pulled into a legitimate garden center, which had this American wondering, how's this brunch going to work? But I was just along for the ride, and they seemed to know what they were about. So after meandering through a selection of potting soils, plants, and yard ornaments, we found a collection of tables, and it wasn't long before I was served one of the best brunches of my life. Say hello to the meat haystack, complete with 2 homemade haystacks, smashed avocado, sour cream, poached egg, bacon, and salsa. Thus began my love affair with food in the United Kingdom, which I had honestly heard nothing but horror stories about over the years. So this one hit me right in the mouth. Someone call that Tennessee trooper, because this meal should be illegal. After reluctantly pulling myself away from the garden center and restaurant, it was time to hop in the driver's seat and get a feel for driving the troopy on the way back to Tim and Marge's place. In this case, I already had a leg up on the experience thanks to my right-hand drive HJ45 troopy back in the States, but this was a whole new game being on the other side of the road. Now it was time to prep the Land Cruisers for our long drive north to Scotland. It's always interesting going through other camp kits to see what gear folks lean on for their kitchen setup, sleeping arrangements, and toolkits. I almost always come away with some new ideas and love chatting through the strengths and weaknesses of different products. We probably could have completed this simple task in an hour or so, but when you put 2 gear junkies in the same garage, things tend to drag out a bit more.
Pops loose.
You can put a few poles on top.
Oh, it's like a Dutch oven.
Yeah, so you can do this is the same idea. I mean,
It hit that and then,
sort of
convection
move it
around.
Oh
Yeah.
as opposed to this style.
Tim ordered this Northbound Expeditions trash bag from our Overland.pro store, so I was able to give him a personalized installation course. It's pretty cool to see some of the places around the world where our favorite gear ends up. Since you've already met Tim's troopy, let me introduce you to Mustard, a 1979 BJ40 in spectacular condition, including a recently rebuilt 3-liter 4-cylinder diesel engine from Benji and crew back at Craddock & Sons. With the packing mostly sorted, I lent a hand checking the fluids and giving both rigs a good inspection. With all the important fluids confirmed on the rigs, we also needed to ensure our camping fluid levels were within factory spec as well.
So this is called Mobile Brewery.
It's called choices.
The last thing we want to do is run dry around a toasty campfire. So I think this should do nicely.
When in the UK.
And mustard.
Awesome.
Oh, those are beautiful. Yeah. How many have you got?
6. Good, you think?
Yeah.
As you know, there's nothing like packing for a special trip to get the excitement flowing. And by now, my jet lag was wearing off. So the reality of where I was and what we were about to do was really starting to get the butterflies going. With all the gear packed and ready, it was time for one last sleep before an early wake up to begin our drive north to Scotland for a very special Land Cruiser event. next morning, we were up extra early to hopefully avoid the worst of the traffic on the motorway. But with storms rolling in, it didn't look like we would be in any hurry anyhow. Oh, and here's another traveler you've yet to meet. Say hello to Angus, the Highland cow. This little guy usually travels with Tim and Marge on their adventures, but this time he'll be riding shotgun with me in the troopy. After a few hours of driving, our stomachs were craving a hearty breakfast, and so we stopped in at the T-Base Services Farm Shop and Restaurant. One of the things that I'm really loving about the food here is that most of it is sourced from local farms, so you're literally eating something from the countryside that surrounds you. This time around, I'm diving into an infamous Scottish dish that I've been wanting to try for years. So, without further ado, enter the haggis.
Here we go. First bite of haggis.
Tasty.
Very good. Different from anything I've ever had before.
Wow. Moment. It's the moment.
After a satisfying breakfast thanks to the healthy portions, we took a few minutes to peruse the farm shop for a few fresh additions to our supplies before heading out to the rigs for a quick check on fluids before continuing on our journey. About an hour further up the M6, I spotted the unmistakable blue and white sign ahead that welcomed us to the land of my ancestors. I actually got goosebumps as we crossed into the land of the Scots. And what does one do to celebrate crossing into Scotland? Well, I'll give you one guess. Welcome to the Annandale Distillery. You can explain what this is?
Okay, so this is Iron Brew,
Uh-huh.
and it's known as Scotland's other national drink.
Okay.
So it's quite apt actually that we're at the first national drink of Scotland, which is the whisky distillery.
Uh-huh.
So we'll start with the Iron Brew, and
Go from there.
The rest will be history.
While we awaited our tour to begin, Marge, who is from Scotland herself, introduced me to Iron Brew, which was about all we would be drinking for now, since we still had some ground to cover. But thankfully, the tour includes sample bottles for tasting later. All right. I like that. So this would be what we would call an orange cream soda in the States. Yeah. Good call. Good call.
Is that refreshing, is it?
It is. Now, if you've never toured a distillery, whether you're a whiskey fan or not, the process is absolutely fascinating. It all starts by soaking barley and allowing it to germinate. Then it's spread on malting floors where enzymes convert the starches into fermentable sugars. After that, the barley is dried in a kiln, usually with peat as a fuel source, which gives Scotch whiskey, or just whiskey as they call it here, a smoky, peaty flavor. Then it's ground into a coarse flour called grist before being mixed with hot water, which helps dissolve the sugars, creating a liquid called wort. The wort is then fermented, which converts the sugars into alcohol. This liquid is then distilled in copper stills, which separates the alcohol from the solids in a multi-stage process. And since alcohol has a lower boiling point than water, it rises up the neck of the still, leaving most of the water and solids behind, purifying the downstream product as it condenses from a vapor back to a liquid and, in effect, extracting the alcohol. This is a volatile step, and a mistake here could be disastrous. So the liquid is separated in cuts. The 3 cuts, as they're called, are the foreshots, the heart, and the feints. Only the heart is placed in oak casks, where it ages and takes on the flavor profile of the wood and any other fluids that were previously aged in the cask itself, usually sherry, bourbon, or wines, which gives each whiskey its own distinctive flavor. After 3 to 50 years, depending on your patience, the casks are open and the whiskey is either bottled as a single malt from a single source, or it's blended with other whiskeys to create the desired flavor profile. This is about as simple as I can make this explanation, but the world of whiskey making is quite an interesting process if you ever have the inclination to explore it.
That's the orange and whiskey, yeah.
And it was called
Nation of Scots.
Nation of Scots.
Yeah, oh, enjoy.
Thank you very much.
So what would you call this event that's happening right here?
Afternoon tea.
Afternoon tea.
So this is lemon cake.
Okay.
This is ginger.
Before our final drive of the day, we tried a few samplings from the distillery restaurant, along with a spot of tea to celebrate checking off my first Scottish bucket list item.
So apparently you chop it there.
Oh my. After pushing through Glasgow traffic, we headed into the countryside and made our way towards the iconic Loch Lomond. While dirt roads are few and far between here, I was more than busy keeping the troopy on this narrow and fast route with lorries blazing past, leaving only a few inches between me and a bad day at the body shop. The plentiful hubcaps permanently enshrined on the rocks jutting from the hillside didn't exactly help with the feeling I was about to be squished at the next choke point. But after several miles, I got the hang of it all, and we pulled over to take a breather on the shores of Loch Lomond. Just a few minutes drive up the road, we arrived at our first camp of the trip at Beinglass Campground, which not only has a grassy field for tents and camper vans, but also has bathrooms, showers, and a pub, aptly named the Stagger Inn. Finally, after a long day of travel, we were ready to pitch our tents and relax a bit before the next leg of our journey. I guess you're wondering where I'm sleeping. Well, this will be my very first time trying out a swag. While these are super popular in Australia, you don't often see them in the States, so I was very interested to see how the new format would work.
You know what I nicknamed these in the States? Burritos.
With camp all set up and having checked in with a family back in Utah, we headed to the Stagger Inn for some tasty pub food and beverages before turning in, exhausted but excited for what was to come. This morning, I am pinching myself to make sure it's not a dream. Yep, I am really in Scotland, and I'm drinking real coffee with my good friends before heading on our way to a special event. But even with all this beautiful sunshine, we had some troubles brewing on the proverbial horizon. A cursory morning inspection identified that a slight leak on the master cylinder was getting worse. So we're attempting to head it off before the next leg of our journey by snugging up a few connections. So I got maybe a 1/16 of a turn, about 2 mil. That one's really, let's see if I can get 1 more mil on it. I don't want to force it too much, but so let's dry that really well and just watch it for the next few minutes. That's the hard part about some of these rigs that we have that sit and go on a trip and then sit. There's something about the expansion and contraction that kind of irritates stuff like this. Check 1, 2.
Yep, receiving over.
Sounds good. After a mile or two of driving, Tim and Marge pulled off to check on the leak status before we got too serious about the day's travels. I'll see if you can guess by the looks on our faces if our day was getting any better. Apparently, there was a breakdown on the interior of the brake pressure warning sensor that was letting brake fluid weep out the bottom. What started as just a bit of wetness at the beginning of the trip was now steadily draining the fluid reservoir with every stop.
All part of the adventure. Well, let's think about this. Not here. It's in that seam there.
While Tim got on the horn to try and get some parts on the way to the event, I set to coming up with a way to stem the tide and limp us the rest of the way there. Plan A was to try and use some Araldite epoxy, which is similar to our American JB weld. Hopefully this wasn't a high pressure leak and we could block off the seepage long enough to find a replacement sensor. Now, we just needed to sit back and wait for the resin to set up properly before we gave it a pressure test. Thankfully, Marge, who was keeping abreast of the situation, had found a coffee stand with just what we needed to help pass the time.
All right, the repair continues. The JB weld is almost set up, but Marge has found us a little treat while we wait. So, explain to me what we've got here.
So we have some coffee. We have 2 Americanos for the boys, and this is a flat white for me, and this one is for Sarah.
In spirit.
Yeah.
Oh.
So don't worry, it will still be in there when it gets across the Atlantic, and it's.
Oh wow.
So it's heather and wild berries, and it's a nice candle smell.
Nice. We got you something, Sarah.
And then, just to keep the hunger at bay, in here, what's called an Empire biscuit. So it is shortbread with raspberry jam in the middle and icing on the top, and then a little jelly tot. You only get them in Scotland.
Only in Scotland.
Yeah.
Awesome. Let's dive in.
Yeah.
Oh my. Look, there's stuff inside. After sipping our coffee and nibbling our Empire biscuits for the required setup time, there was only one thing left to do. Cross our fingers and hope our patch job held up.
Oh, stop.
As it turns out, the sensor was completely failing and let far too much pressure blow out the epoxy.
What do we say?
Ugh.
At the lock. Dang it. That was a good try.
Does it look similar?
Actually, just stick your finger in this when this is ready.
So, we resorted to plan B. Try to find a bolt that matched the threads as a plug.
Oh, no.
Unfortunately, there was nothing in the spare hardware bin that was even close, so we had to move on to plan C. This time around, we're going to try and plug the sensor from the top and let the pressure work for us by plugging the sensor port with some sealant and a chunk of gasket that happened to fit perfectly.
Bit of an unorthodox fix, but we'll see. Ready? Ready, go.
Once again, we crossed our fingers and gave the brake pedal a few good stomps to find that our patch job was holding and we were back in business. After a quick parking lot test to make sure we didn't get any air in the system and mark on the reservoir to monitor fluid levels, we were finally on our way again. I just love it when a good roadside repair works out.
Whatever it takes.
Those things from me you stole. You know me, I cashed out long ago, out of any for control. Careful with the highlight reels we post. Half of it's the truth and half we've sold. The truth we've halfway told. suppose we'll know it. Let's go. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Let's go. Whoa, whoa.
With our wee debacle sorted on mustard, it was time to turn our attention to the beauty of the Highlands as we wound our way over the grass-covered mountains, through whitewashed villages, and alongside glassy lochs. For me, this drive wasn't just about a tourist experience in a beautiful new country. This hit so much harder now that I was driving through the land of my ancestors. Ever since stumbling across another McCuiston's legacy in the Yukon Territory of Canada 6 years ago, when I found that Jack McCuiston was considered the father of the Yukon, I've been infatuated with tracing my family's history back to its roots. I come from Clan Uiston, or Uishton as we are called, which was a sept of Clan Donald, which means that I was now entering the easternmost edges of their once vast territory. These lands were once held by clan chiefs who operated more like independent kings in those days, with power and influence that rivaled even the Scottish kings. Being one of the largest clans in Scotland's history with a rebellious streak against anyone who had forced them into fealty meant things weren't always as peaceful as they appear now. As we drove further into their historical lands, it was surreal to imagine what life would have been like here hundreds of years ago at the peak of the MacDonald's dynasty. Little did I know that this connection to my clan would be more a part of this adventure than I ever dreamed. But more on that connection later. After a long but rewarding day of travel, we arrived on the shores of a beautiful loch where our fellow Land Cruiser friends had pitched base camp for the classic cruise event. As we were picking out a camp spot, we met the event organizer and true Land Cruiser fanatic, Ali Loader, along with the laird of the estate, who had graciously opened up his private land to our group's event, which is a rare exception here in Scotland. With introductions complete and our stomachs reminding us that we had totally skipped lunch to fix Mustard's brakes, we began setting up camp while the sun set over the loch. It all made for a magical moment as I soaked in the reality of where I was and the palpable sense of connection to this land.
Too easy. Somebody did teach me.
This would be my second night in a swag for this trip, and I have to say, it's actually quite nice even for my 6'3" frame. Oh, that's just over 190 centimeters for my UK friends. You just have to remember to grab your next day's clothes the night before and do a bit of wiggling to change. But I'm looking to add one of these to my own kit for simple solo trips or when we have a guest of our own.
I've come to find out here on the road so many men with talent, only few have the soul. As I'm looking at my face in the water, I'm wondering if I am alone. Maybe I'm no better than the man who pays $1 for a fish. Maybe I'm no different than the ones who are running all of this. Well, I'm just searching for a peace of mind, and I'm just a traveler passing through for time.
Now it was time to cook up a proper meal. And seeing how Tim and Marge are well acquainted with my favorite food groups, they were well prepared for a celebratory supper in lifestyle overland style with some delicious steaks. Not only had they chosen the perfect fare, but Tim actually passed the sacred torch of barbecue responsibility to myself. And while it's been a very long time since I've cooked over coals, I think we ended up with some of the tastiest steaks I've ever had. Although that could be the seasoning of a beautiful location and good friends enhancing the whole experience. With our ravenous appetite satisfied, it was time to join everyone around the campfire for a wee dram. As I sat listening to the chatter of multiple conversations and so many interesting accents from different corners of the world, this boy from Tennessee was overwhelmed with gratitude and maybe a little bit of imposter syndrome as I listened to story after story around the fire. Who would have ever thought that I'd end up here on the shores of a loch in Scotland and be a part of such a special gathering of like-minded travelers?
What's that? Well, that's black pudding.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is black pudding?
I guess a lot of the cuts that you meat you probably wouldn't eat necessarily.
Yeah.
Yeah, the blood. I think they also call it blood sausage.
Blood sausage.
Yeah.
All right. After a delicious breakfast, oh, and by the way, I did enjoy the black pudding, Paul with West Coast Off-Road came to the rescue for Mustard's questionable patch job with a proper plug to replace the sensor. After a few field trials, it looked like we would be in business for some trails. With everyone rounded up and ready to roll, Allie gave us a briefing on what to expect for the day, along with some reminders to respect the lands we've been given special access to. With everyone on the same page, there was nothing left to do but head off into the Highlands and see what the day held.
That exit was slippier than I thought. Yeah, thanks. Was you in 2 or 4 then? 4.
Higher and higher we climbed into the hills with our legendary steeds growling steadily along as the aroma of diesel smoke filled our senses alongside the pungent smell of wet earth and grass. Now, I've traveled a lot of miles and seen some beautiful places in all our years of adventures, but here, with the land falling away into the valleys below, revealing Scotland through the mist, I knew this moment would forever be etched to my mind, not only for its stunning beauty, but because somewhere inside, I strangely felt as if I had come home. I know it sounds odd, and I can't quite put it all into words. All I do know is that something like this was playing in my head as we neared the summit of our trail. Well, I'm a bit at loss for words for this one. Such an incredible country. You know, in a strange way, it feels a lot like coming home. Knowing that my ancestors lived here as well, just kind of beginning to touch on their footsteps. I can see why they loved it so much. What a place. What a place. Gorgeous. And peaceful. After spending some time on the summit surrounded by grassy rolling hills and misty clouds, we began our descent to see what else the day held for us. As our tires slipped and splashed to the mud and our diesels growled with downshifts to ease off these steep hillsides, I couldn't help but marvel at how lucky we were to be exploring where so few have traveled. Our usual adventures are across the extensive public lands in the United States, but here in Scotland, virtually all land is private, so having a special permission to drive along these roads is a rare occurrence. Overlanding here looks a lot different than it does back home, with much more campgrounds and paved roads than we're used to. Even still, if you're considering this country as an adventure destination, then you'll have more than enough castles, stone circles, and beautiful scenery to keep you on the edge of your seat, which we'll get into later in this video. But for now, let's just enjoy the drive. After a few miles, we noticed that some of the rigs behind us had dropped out of sight, and through some patchy radio messages, we deciphered that there might be some trouble. So we all held up, and I hopped in the West Coast off-road rig with Paul to backtrack and see if we could lend a hand.
I don't think there's any phone signal.
No.
Apparently, one of our group had gotten a little too close to the ditch line and slipped off the track. After a few attempts of trying to steer his Land Cruiser back onto the road, he was left mired deeper and deeper in the Highland mud as he slid further down the hill, where it only got worse.
Tell anyone this was part of the plan.
I appreciate the effort on the content.
Yeah.
Oh, that's it. You've got to think about the footage you're getting out of it, Oh, these Max tracks look like they've never been near mud.
Oh, they're fresh. Look at that.
Gonna see what ideas we come up with.
It gets hard though.
Can I just stick it on that recovery point?
Yeah, it's better going out back really.
Yeah.
Probably make less mess as well. Because it's not stuck, so nothing's going to snap up.
No.
Oh, yeah. Good.
Sides on anyway.
Nice and steady. Steady. That's it. That's it. Now just get into over here. Just keep driving.
Easy enough.
Oh, not bad. Bit of fun.
We throws it in there.
Yeah, look at that.
Yeah, look at that.
It's not smelly peat bog.
It wasn't going to get any better either.
And it drove all the way there.
Yeah.
After a few minutes of winching uphill and shoveling out a fresh line in the greasy muck for some traction boards, we were all back on track and joined up with the rest of the group, where they'd found an interesting bypass for the bridge that looked like it would be a fun challenge, so obviously we had to give it a go.
With our technical appetites somewhat satisfied, we made our way back to camp, but not before running into another obstacle that would turn out to be impassable. It turns out an outdoor wedding was in full swing along the road we were using to leave the estate. And while some people might appreciate a classy Land Cruiser salute to signify long-lasting reliability in their future, the event manager informed us that we would not be able to take part in this blessing, and so we reluctantly rerouted our convoy as bagpipes played instead. Their loss. After returning to camp and setting up for night 2 of our gathering, Marge and I took Mustard up the road to investigate what the landowner had told us was an old Viking grave. One of the incredible parts about these lands is that there are layers upon layers of stories from different people groups throughout history. Whereas back home in the United States, we're usually only accustomed to finding remnants of Native American culture in the form of rock art and some stacked stones from old dwellings. But here in this old shed that was built to protect the site lies a Viking grave which hints to one of the many civilizations that exercised their power and influence over the land for about 500 years. This particular site has already been excavated and its occupants relocated from what we were told, but it's still quite the surreal experience. Meanwhile, back at camp, Tim was cooking up some of his apple curry chicken while everyone gathered around for a raffle to support the Scotland Charity Air Ambulance Organization. If you've enjoyed this series, then please take a look at the link below to help support this cause. Then it was time to turn off the cameras for the night and enjoy some time around the fire with new friends, along with a fresh bottle of whiskey I'd just won in the raffle. The next day, it was time to break camp and say goodbye to our new friends as Tim, Marge, and myself headed off to explore a few more incredible landmarks here in Scotland. But not before learning one more interesting fact about this land. I had had the opportunity to chat with the laird of the estate during our time here and asked about the history of the previous owners, to which he replied that this was once MacDonald land before the Campbells captured it from them during their infamous feud. His family then purchased it from the Campbells in the 20th century, which was apparently the only time it peacefully changed hands in known history. So, it was very possible that this whole time I'd been camping and driving over land that was once owned by my ancestors a few hundred years ago. It's little things like this that make exploring so exciting for me, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't get chills with the realization that I had inadvertently stumbled upon yet another connection to my ancestors.
All right, well, that's going to wrap it up for Classic Cruise, but the Scottish adventure is not over. Going to go grab a quick little Airbnb, wash up, good night's sleep, dry things out, figure out what's next. But thank you guys so much for welcoming me to your event. I had an absolute blast. Thank you so much to the landowner for allowing us to explore a seldom seen piece of Scotland. So we will definitely be back, maybe with the whole family next year. All right, let's go.
After making our way to Loch Gilphead, we settled into our little bed and breakfast, which was family owned and managed.
So we're the double. You're the double, you're upstairs again. Okay. Well, and room 3's in there. All right. That's yourself, is it?
This is quite the exception from my experiences in the States, where you hit the nearest chain hotel for a shower and bed with barely a word spoken to the desk personnel. Here, we were shown to our rooms by a friendly host who was very interested in discussing American politics once he learned where I was from. And speaking of the locals, another thing that I absolutely love about food in Scotland and England was how nearly every restaurant sourced their menus from local farmers and fishermen to make for what was honestly some of the best food I've ever had. Well, outside of my wife's kitchen, of course. The next morning, we polished off the breakfast part of the B&B, complete with more haggis and black pudding, before heading out to visit some nearby historical landmarks I've been looking forward to seeing. It was becoming pretty clear that I could spend many lifetimes exploring the historical aspects of this land. From ancient standing stones to medieval churches, there's something interesting almost everywhere you look. And while this mound of grass and rock may appear somewhat insignificant, it actually played an important role in the early days of Scotland. This was a seat of power for the kings of Dal Riata, who were believed to have come from Northern Ireland. Perched on a hilltop with a strategic view, excavations have found artifacts from as far away as the Mediterranean, which hints to a hub of trade and culture as well. But most interestingly, a prominent rock has a footprint etched in its surface, which is where it is believed these kings of the 6th century would be coronated by stepping into the print and becoming one with the land. Evidence suggests that this kingdom rose to be one of immense power and influence, though today, little remains of this once great Gaelic nation. As we headed south again, we made a detour to Peebles, Scotland to visit Scotland Overland. Back in 2020, we had plans to explore Scotland in one of their Hiluxes and Defenders, but unfortunately, due to COVID shutting down international travel, that adventure never got off the ground. It was still great to finally meet these folks and see how an overland rental business is managed in Scotland. So, if you're ever interested in camping your way across this beautiful country, you can find them at scotlandoverland.com and tell them we sent you. We also popped into the West Coast Off-Road Shop, owned and operated by Paul and Vicky, who had joined us on the Classic Cruise. Now, what's the one thing you would never expect to find at a Land Cruiser specialty shop? One of the coolest military Jeep collections I've ever seen. While I sometimes enjoy joking with my Jeep owner friends about Toyotas versus Jeeps. I actually do find them to be pretty cool, especially when they're vintage units like these.
And that's that.
That's that.
Until next time. All right, folks, wrapping up one incredible journey here in the UK, back into England now with Tim and Mars. Thank you guys so much for showing me around this beautiful country, and I had an absolute blast. I'll tell you what, we'll definitely be back, but I gotta bring somebody with me next time around. I'm in a bit of trouble for not bringing Sarah, but just so you know, I received special permission to come here by myself and get a feel for everything, so the whole family will be back sooner than later. It's been quite the experience, being able to experience it not only from some really cool overland rigs, but a 40 series and a 70 series. How did the 40 series do for you?
The 40 series went awesome.
Yeah.
A little problem with stopping at one point. But
yeah.
That was fine.
Yeah.
Over that one. But yeah, no, the 40 series went well. Parked it in the garage last night and pretty sure it would have just gone and done it all again. Yeah. The driver, not so much.
Well, I got in it for a few minutes to drive it when we went to check out the Viking grave, and literally it was like, oh my gosh, it wasn't even a kilometer. I was going, bless your hearts, because that right there is one heck of a ride, and bless your heart for sticking with him the whole time. You could have come and rode with me. I didn't know how rough it was.
Yeah, it was very sugary.
Yeah. I gotta also say, some of the best food in my life. And Sarah's a good cook, but when it comes to eating out, we had some of the best meals that I think I've ever had at some of these little places. And the beauty of it is it's so locally sourced. You know, we don't get to experience that a lot in the States. So kind of what's on the menu is what was caught or what was grown within just a few miles of the places, and you could tell it was spectacular. Also got to learn a lot about the Scottish history, learned how to interpret the Scottish accent a little bit, made a few mistakes, just a few mistakes, and those will forever be some inside jokes that we share. But there is one thing that I will leave you with, and that is the fact that proper Scottish people have a little bit of trouble saying purple burglar alarm, but Marge has been practicing it, so she's gonna send you off with the phrase. All right, drum roll, Marge. Can you do it?
Purple burglar alarm.
Oh, there it is. There it is. All right. Well, again, thank you guys so much.
No, you're very welcome. Come again.
We will be back. Most definitely. Now, fly out tomorrow, head off to Phoenix, and continue the new build. And then in 2 weeks' time, we'll be northbound yet again. Caroline and I are headed to Alaska, to Kodiak Island, so it's going to be fun. Right along. We'll see you next time.